Welcome to another episode of the Flats Nation Podcast. And a big shout out to Brother Dave Fader down Amarada for the awesome music. You can check out more of Dave's phenomenal work on davidfader.com. Well, today we have a awesome guest. This is your host, Dave Legier, and we have a friend of mine, Captain Tommy Derringer, with us. Tommy has been a big help to me, especially when I was looking at some different skiffs, and he's always was very helpful when I asked a quick question on something or whatever the case may be. I'd send him a quick text message or I'd call him and he responded right back. He's been awesome to work with. And Tommy, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to join us for this podcast and to go through some questions and to get everybody caught up on you and how everything is going. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Dave, man, I'm excited to talk to you, man. I can't wait to get into it.
Give me a brief history on Tommy and his passions in life.
Yeah, I've had a lot. You know, currently, I would say it's the number one is going to be my kids right now. Of course. You know, I have 3 little girls, and
God bless
under the
you.
age of 10. Right? Thanks. Yes. But yeah, you know, it's funny. My wife and I joke about this sometimes that, you know, I feel like I've lived a few different lives already. And, you know, being that when I was in high school, I played music and surfed, but music, I thought I was going to be a musician.
All right, you're going to be the next rock star.
Yeah. You know, hey, it was a lot of fun, and we did the whole thing. We toured around, and I had a hard rock, punk rock band, whatever you want to call it. But that didn't really pan out, although later on I ended up actually owning a little recording studio and kind of kept up with it. And so that's probably something not a lot of people know about me. And then at the same time, I was also actually playing a lot of golf and got into the golf business. I was about 2 years out of high school. I ended up going to PGA school, PGA college, whatever they want to call it. And
wow.
Yeah, I was a golf teaching pro for right about 10 years before I became a fishing guide. So,
well, that's where you learn your patience to have 3 little girls.
Right. Yeah, that could definitely be true. You definitely need some patience for golf and kids for sure. More for kids, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, you know, that was, you know, and the fish or the golfing was cool because my scheduling, the schedule that I kept when I had that job, allowed me to fish a lot. So I've always been into fishing through all those other passions. And there's other ones that I didn't mention as well. I tend to get obsessed with whatever it is I'm into at the time, whether it be music or fishing or golf or, you know, it's been in other things as well. But through all that, the fishing was always a big part of my life during all those times.
Well,
but specifically during the golf time, I was able to keep a schedule and work when I needed to, and then it left me a lot of time to fish, which was really cool, which made it a pretty cool job.
Well, you probably needed to do it just to give yourself some time in the decompression tank, just to get out there on the flats and go exhale a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there were long hours there working at the golf course a lot of times, but there was a lot of days too where we for lunch we went fishing and didn't come back. You know,
It did come back,
and it was okay. So yeah, it was pretty cool, and it was a good way to kind of get my feet wet into the world of fishing and tournament fishing specifically, which was cool.
So how did you transition from golf into becoming a guide? Was this a spinoff from your time at the Redfish Tour events, or were you a guide first? How did that play out?
Yeah, so I really got into the redfish thing when I was in the golf business, and just started doing, did a couple like the local tournaments. I love to compete. I've always been very competitive in pretty much everything I've done. So it was just, to combine fishing with competing, it was right up my alley. So I got into it when I was a golf pro. I started doing, local tournaments, then got into the quote unquote pro redfish tournaments.
Right.
And
IFA.
I was doing IFA. It was the ESPN Redfish Cup.
Right, Redfish Cup. Then didn't we have one called the Redfish Tour, if I'm not mistaken?
It was the FLW.
FLW, that's right.
The Walmart FLW Tour, which was also big at the time. And again, my schedule, it was nice. I was able to take time off to go for, sometimes weeks at a time. We didn't have kids then, so I was able to take weeks off at a time and go do these tournaments, mostly through Florida, but also we did Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia. We did it all over did them all over the place. But yeah, that was what led me into guiding and getting my captain's license. Actually, there were so many guys on those tours that were captains. So that kind of sparked my interest a little bit. And then just so happened, one of the guys that worked for me at the golf course, as another job of his, he taught the captain's class. So he told me, he said, "Hey, if you want to come in, excuse me, one day, one weekend day for like a month or two and just do the class like that." He said, "Yeah, I won't even charge you. Just come sit in on it and you can do it." And so I said, "Well, heck, that'd be cool. Why not?" So I did it and got my captain's license. And then everybody at the golf course knew that I was a big fisherman, and kind of word got out that I had my captain's license, and people started saying, "Well, when are you taking me fishing?"
Right.
So that's kind of what sparked, I never really got the captain's license, even thinking that I was going to actually be a full-time fishing guide. That wasn't really my initial idea. But when I started hearing this from people, I was going, that sounds like it would be pretty good. And I saw an opportunity because here in St. Augustine, where I mostly guide out of, at that time, I felt like most of the guides that were doing it full-time were not marketing themselves online like they should have been.
Oh, well, of course. Right. I see that a lot.
And and this was a long time ago. It was pre, not pre-Facebook social media, but it kind of was pre all that stuff. And there wasn't a lot of online stuff for fishing, especially in this area. So luckily for me, I had a really good buddy who designed websites and knew how to do SEO stuff and all that. So he got me set up, and it was kind of off to the races.
What from the Redfish Tour events really helped you? What did you like competing in those, and how has that transitioned over into your guiding?
I think learning patterns is such a huge deal in guiding,
Sure.
and in tournament fishing, any kind of fishing. Because especially when you're fishing or you're guiding 5-6 days a week, knowing the pattern of the fish is going to help you out tremendously. Now, it doesn't always, that pattern can change at the drop of a hat, but
of course they have tails. I say that all the time.
Right,
they have tails.
Right.
They're going to leave. They're going to move.
But the more you do, the more you can try to pattern the fish, you get a really good feel for what they like to do at different times of the year, different tides, at different, during different weather patterns, whatever it might be. But in those redfish tournaments, that's what it was all about. You would pre-fish for, if you were lucky, maybe a couple of weeks, usually, 10 days or less, more like 5 days for the most part. So you had to kind of cram in as much of that patterning as you could into that short period of time, which I think helped me a lot right off the bat, because, I felt like I intimately knew what my fish were doing. And I think it really helped me at least being confident as a guide starting out, where I think maybe, a lot of guides when they're starting out probably haven't, if they have not had that experience of having to pattern fish like that could be a pretty tough learning curve, I think.
Yes, very much so. I hear your daughters have become quite the flats fishermen themselves. When did you get them started on fishing? And more importantly, I saw a picture of one. It looked like she was throwing a swim bait. These girls aren't out there chunking live shrimp. How did you pull that off at such a young age?
Well, I mean, it's funny. Our first daughter, I think she was 2.5 or so, I think, caught her first fish. It was a sheep's head. But, it's just, I'm on the boat so much. And before we had kids, my wife and I fished together a lot. If I had time off, we both like to go fish together. So I think it was just a natural thing that happened. But I mean, we're really blessed to have our kids love anything outdoors. All three of them are tomboys, and they're the girliest girly girls, at the same time. But they just they love it, which is really cool. And I never forced it on them. But my oldest, who's 9 years old, Avon, she's caught redfish using lures. She's caught them on top water. She sight fished a couple this winter, which I was really proud of. I was poling the boat. She was on the platform. She did not land one of the ones she sight fished, but she hooked a couple that came off. But it's so much fun. I kind of joke with her, but I'm kind of serious about her. I always say, like, you're going to be my redfish tournament partner.
Why
when
not?
You get a little older. Yeah, because
if she's good on a push pull, just send her down. I'll have her pull me around.
That's right. That's the next thing. That's what I really need. That's the more important than fishing is I need to teach them how to pull the boat so I can be on the front of the boat. That's actually what needs to happen. But no, I don't get them out as much as I'd like to. Sometimes when you're on the water 6 days in a row, and that
last
one day
thing you want to do, right? I get it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even that. It's not the fishing part. It's the whole rigmarole of getting the boat out and then cleaning it when you that whole thing. So
sure,
but starting about this time of year when the weather's nice and all through the summer, we'll be on the boat as much as we can, and we have a lot of fun with it.
Well, some of those pictures I've seen, Maverick needs to grab some of them and put them in their catalog. Oh,
yeah, thanks. Yeah,
I saw her up there on the forward casting platform. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. She's definitely. We know where she got those skills. She spent a lot of time with Daddy out there, but I was like, that's not live bait she's throwing. That's a swim bait. That's great. That's
now I've got her out there throwing the fly rod. She's got she can toss the fly rod a little bit. Now that's just in the yard so far. We have not been out on the boat to do that, but she's into it. So I won a fly rod, 8-weight fly rod at a CCA event, one of the auctions, or not the auction, but the raffle. Right. And I had an old reel and I got some new line on it, and now that setup stays in our garage, just kind of. It's it can be beat up, so it's just kind of laying around, but it's nice because it's laying there and they pick it up. It's not put away. And I feel like if you put that, most fly rods are so expensive these days.
Oh,
and
God, yes.
So you put them up like it's a shrine that nobody can touch. But this one's just kind of, it's on the floor, it's leaning up against the outdoor fridge or whatever, outside fridge, and they can just pick it up and go. And I've been pleasantly surprised a couple times I've come home and one of them will be out there flinging it around in the front yard, but when I'm not even there, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Now, have you got them tying flies yet?
I have not. I have not tied a fly. It's been it's been probably 5 or 6 years for me. Once we started having kids, I kind of got out of doing that a little bit, made room for some other things. But
sure, it's time. There's only so much time. Right?
Yeah, I used to. It's funny. In fact, today there's a new little fly shop that's going to open up just down the road from my house here, called Oldest City Fly Shop. And I was telling those guys that same story today. They said, "Hey, if you tie flies, let us know. We'd like to carry some." And I said, "Oh man, I need to get back into it. I haven't done it in a while."
Well, it allows you. For me, it's photography. And I've tied some flies in the past, and I used to be a big fan of it. And I think it's just a way for allow you to bring out your creative side, while at the same time, the person that's going to make the flies that work best for your ecosystem is you, because you're the one that's seeing what's there, what they're striking and what they're chasing. So there's there is some serious advantages to taking the time to learn how to tie your own flies. I think it's an art form, and I can really appreciate it, because some of these flies look, you put them beside a pilchard or something, they look just like it. It's just amazing how close some of these guys can make these.
Oh
things.
yeah. Some of them are incredible. And there's no feeling better than when you catch I don't care what kind of fish it is. It could be a pinfish, but if you catch a fish on a fly that you tied, it's like a full circle kind of feeling. It's like it's a really cool, rewarding experience to do that. With something that you made.
That's right. You fooled him on your own gear.
Right. But yeah, it's always really cool.
How has Brother Rick Murphy helped and influenced your guiding career and your I gotta say it, TV career? I enjoy what you do on the Florida Insider Fishing Report, and not to knock the other guys, but Marie and I will be sitting there. I go, just fast forward and get to Tommy's. I just want to hear what they're doing.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, Rick. I really look up to Rick. I mean, there probably isn't anybody around that has more experience than that guy. I mean, when he tells you something, or when he's talking about something and it has to do with fishing, you need to listen, because he knows what he is talking about. And I've learned a lot of stuff on the fishing side of things. He's also, aside from the fishing, which he's obviously a master at, he's a great businessman. So, he's given me a lot of great advice as far as that goes. And he's a good dude. I mean, he's a good family man. He's overall just a really good guy. And he's helped me out. Like you talked about on the TV, like I had no TV experience before hooking up with him and his show. And, he's helped me out. When I was real little, I kind of considered myself sort of a shy kid. Like I didn't want to be the kid that got up and gave his book report in front of the class or whatever, or give up, I didn't want to do that. I did it, but it wasn't my favorite thing. But these days, I really look forward to getting up and in front, whether it be in front of the camera or in front of a crowd or whatever it is. And, he's helped me with that. But just overall, just knowing the guy, I'm really happy that I know him, because he's taught me a lot, for sure.
How long have you been on the Florida Insider Fishing Report now?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was thinking about that today. And I think it's 6, maybe 7 years now.
Has it been that long? I kept thinking it was like 5. So. But yeah, that's great.
And that might be right. I'm so bad with timelines. You might be right, but it's in that vicinity. I think it might be 6 years, but it's flown by. It doesn't even seem like it's crazy. I can't believe it's been that long, but it's been a really fun ride. I mean, I've enjoyed, every minute of it. I've got to do some really cool things. I got to meet some really cool people.
Oh, I bet.
And knowing Rick, and kind of puts you in with some people that you wouldn't usually meet in this industry. And,
sure.
That's huge. And he's introduced me to some really great people. And,
he's a nice guy. I've met him several times. I love Rick to death. He's just a heck of a guy. Always willing to help.
He is. And I don't think he'd get mad for saying it. He's a funny dude too.
He is.
I mean, every time I hang out with him, I don't think maybe people don't know that, but he's just a good dude, but he's funny too. We always have a good laugh.
He's the class clown.
He is. Yeah. And which is awesome. I mean, he's good. And I've done a couple of his Sportsman's Adventure shows with him. I did one down there with him, down in his neck of the woods, and he's done one up here. And that's cool. I mean, he is the consummate pro. He really knows how to put that stuff together. So it was cool to learn that. If I ever go on to do anything like that, I'd have to give him credit for showing me the ropes on that as well. I mean, he knows what he's doing there.
Well, Sportsman's Adventures has been around for, I'm thinking, 15 years, maybe longer. It's been on
longer
TV.
than that. Yeah, longer than that. Again, I'm so bad with timelines, but it's been on for a long time. Yeah, sometimes it's funny, I'm like, I'm on this show that I used to watch when I was a kid. I'm like,
exactly.
I'm on this show. I mean, I say kid, I'm the one, the kid, but it's just, it's cool that I'm getting to do what I'm getting to do. So
I bet. Let's talk gear.
Yeah.
Do you cater your trips to somebody who wants to exclusively fly fish, as well as somebody who wants to, spin and plug cast at the same time? How do you, what's your favorite technique? What do you like to guide somebody and do?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. My favorite thing to do is probably to be pulling the skiff in some shallow water and sight fishing. Now, whether that's throwing a fly at a fish or a lure or even a bait, really, I mean, I really like the hunt. I like the stalking, the hunt. I like that game right there is I just love doing that. Now, I don't get to do that as much as I'd probably like to, but Dave, really, I enjoy doing all of it, whether I'm in the bay boat or the skiff. I mean, I probably have the most eclectic eclectic base of clients. I mean, I have people that are, the incredible fly fishermen, all the way down to people that the only time they've ever fished in their lives is the times they fish with me. And I enjoy all of it. There's a lot of guys that specialize in just fly fishing or or just sight fishing or whatever it might be, which is awesome. I think that's great. But for where I am in St. Augustine, which is a big tourist town,
sure,
a lot of people from out of town, and I think the majority of my trips these days are repeat clients. Probably, probably 90-95% of them.
Wow, that's a pretty high ratio.
Yeah, it's a lot of repeat clients, and because of where I started here in St. Augustine, I think that's why I have the people I do. It's people would come to St. Augustine and not probably have fishing on their mind necessarily, but come into town looking for something to do, and ended up coming out with me to go fishing just because that was something to do here in town, and because it's not necessarily a fishing destination like a lot of places in Florida are, although we have great fishing. But so yeah, I'm kind of proud of that. I think I feel like I'm a well-rounded fishing guide, but I would say definitely my being on the back of the skiff pulling it around that's where I cut my teeth. That's what I love doing. That's probably my favorment thing to do. Now, if I was on the front of the boat, which I'm not very often these days.
No, you don't get to go fishing very much. I know a lot of guides. I fish with a lot of guides. And it's amazing when I go out there. I go, dude, I'll get on the back. Just get on the bow. I'm just here to learn. I'm just here to watch you.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, and I this is funny because people always say, well, what do you do when what do you do for fun? And I always say, well, if I have a day off, I actually still go fishing. I still love it that much. People are like, you're crazy, but I actually like fishing. But if I'm up there these days, I actually really like, I've always loved throwing artificials for redfish or tarpon, and throwing a fly rod. I mean, right now I have a desire to throw the fly rod if I'm up there. That's what I'm into at the moment. But like I said, I don't get to do a whole lot of it. Actually, I'm going to be going down Hansen, who you had on a podcast fairly recently.
Yes,
Hansen Lau. He's great. He invited me to come down. What is it? The first week of June, I think it is. I'm going down to fish with him for a day or two, and maybe throw a fly rod around a little bit. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, I need to jump on the boat and just be the cameraman.
There you go.
That'd be great. I'll have to give him a call. Yeah, that sounds awesome. So now, since you're up in that part of Florida, you probably have a little bit more radical weather and water temperature change than we do here. What do you find? How much of a change are you finding that you have to make throughout your season when it comes to your choice of fly or your choice of lure? I mean, do you have, here we have the mullet will move in and out depending upon the seasons naturally. So you're going to change what you're throwing. Do you have that same type of impact there, or is it even more radical because your water temperatures are a lot more impacted?
Yes and no. I mean, I throw a very similar fly for redfish year round, especially if we're sight fishing redfish. But I think the biggest thing for us, it's a huge change. And that's from when our water goes from our wintertime water, which can be kind of clear to gin clear, right, over to about this time of year, when it warms up, it becomes chocolate milk. And it's just, we were joking before I think we started, and I was saying our water currently looks like yoo-hoo that's been shaken to death.
The winds of March,
doesn't always, and it doesn't always look like that. But we have brown algae here it's not a bad algae. It's just something that grows here when the water gets above about 62, 63 degrees. And then we have a lot of tannins in the water too, because of all the pine trees and stuff in the marshes. So
sure,
as it warms up, our water, you're not going to see the bottom, even if you're in fairly shallow water. So in the wintertime now, the water can be crystal clear, which is a lot of fun for sight fishing, obviously. And we'll throw smaller flies, lighter color flies, and also just overall use lighter tackle, hooks, flies, leaders, all that kind of stuff. In the summer months or in the warmer months, you can be a lot more, you can up your tackle a little bit. You can use bigger flies, bigger lures, stuff that makes noise, top waters, gurglers, even fly. A lot of times when we do our flood tide fishing, which is something I don't know if we're going to talk about or not, but we should. That's something that, it's really unique to this area. We put rattles in our flies. And you can also bump your leader size and your hook size and everything, because the water is so murky, the fish aren't seeing everything as much.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest thing. And then also we have the mullet run. So, our mullet, our big, what we would call our mullet run is our bigger mullet. And that happens, for us, August through September. And, we're using big baits, big lures, big swim baits, big flies, and catching those big mullet and using them for bait as well. So those are kind of our big changes. But, and then we have the flood tide thing. I mean, I think that kind of goes along with this question. We occasionally get these, in the flood tide, let me explain that, I guess, but people might not know what that is, but we get these flood, or some people call them king tides, usually around the full moon or the new moon.
Right. Big hill
especially
tides,
if the wind, big tides. And especially if the wind is blowing onshore from the ocean, it even gets higher. And we have these tides that get up a foot or two over our normal high tide. So the redfish can access these areas that they don't ever get access to. So they're up there eating the crabs that they usually can't get to. And they tail and they do all kinds of crazy things. They get up there and they're snaking with half their body out of the water through the grass. And, that time of year, we're specifically using things that look like little crabs. It's got to be weedless because you're fishing in Spartina grass, which can be really, really thick. So, that's just a couple of different things that we do. So there is some changes. But all that being said, Dave, a clouser will work year round here. A black or white clouser works great for just about everything. And same thing with I use a little, we call Merquan little flies that I use year round for redfish. I think it imitates a little shrimp or a little crab, which is what our redfish heavily feed on here, are small marsh crabs and fiddler crabs and little creek shrimp. And it imitates that perfectly.
Well, I really enjoyed that episode of Guidelines that you did when you were doing the flood tide fishing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That, was really educational, and it was interesting to see how much water. I know y'all have some pretty radical tides up there. Just how much it was flooding up into that Spartina grass. Those redfish were like a bunch of hogs rolling around in there.
Yeah.
Are you throwing a little crab pattern to them at that time that looks like a little mangrove or mud crab? Is that what you're using to pick those fish off?
Yeah, I mean that does really work great. That's a really popular way to do it. A lot of guys will throw something that looks like a small crab, but they also throw a spoon fly. Some guys, that's not my favorite. I personally don't throw that. I just don't like the way that even sounds when it's flying through the air on a fly rod. But they are effective. And then the other thing, I think this has become more popular just in the last 5 years or so is using a gurgler, which is super cool to watch that fish, because you throw a black gurgler, it looks like one of these crabs that fell off a piece of grass, and those redfish come out of their skin to eat that thing off the surface.
They're beasts. I love them.
It is so cool. I mean, we have, when those fish get in the grass, you have a couple different versions of them up there. You have the tailors, the ones that are doing the traditional head down, digging in the mud, and their tails up in the air. And then you have the snakers, or the snaking fish, which they're slowly going through the grass, look like a snake because half their back's out of the water. And then you have the slurpers, which to me is probably the coolest of all of them, because what they're doing, their eyeballs will literally be out of the water, looking for these crabs up on these stalks of grass that are sticking up. And and that's when that gurgler comes into play, and it's super cool. I mean, it's one of the most exciting bites we have around here. It's really, really cool.
So now, what months of the year do you find that pattern to be best? So I know when to set some time to come up here and do it. When's it?
We'll have some sneaky
April what's the best time for that?
We'll have some sneaky little tides like that in April sometimes, especially if the weather helps out with the wind, pushing some extra water in and stuff. But really, and you can have a decent day during that time of year, but really it gets going during the later part of the summer and into the fall. That's when we have the really big tides, and it just seems like that's when there's more crabs hanging out in those areas. Like August, September are probably my two favorite months for it. I think we see more fish in the grass during that time than any other time. But I've actually, you can get them any time of the year if the wind's blowing right. And I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was in February, we had 2 or 3 days where we were flood tide fishing, which is kind of unheard of, and we were catching them then. But in the wintertime, what happens, or at least actually I don't know this as a fact, but I think my theory is that the crabs, they don't come out as much. So I don't think the redfish that they're not as thrilled to get up in there and look for them, just because there's not as many that come out.
Well, that water's probably 10, 15 degrees cooler than it would be.
Yeah, we had water temperatures in the 50s quite a few days this year, in the mostly through January when it was that cold. But yeah, it's typically in the low 60s during the wintertime.
Right.
And then in the summer, obviously it's in August. If you're flood tide fishing, it's not first thing in the morning or right before dark. That water is, it's probably in the 90s.
Yeah, very much so. What about fly rod fishing for redfish in that area? What do you feel works the best? 8 weight, 9 weight, 10? What do you like to? Yeah. And I know some of that's going to be dependent upon the size of the flies that you're throwing, so you can get it to turn over. But what do you like that works best in your ecosystem?
I mean, just kind of what you said. I mean, basically 7, 8, 9 weight. If I have, typically fly fishermen will bring their own gear. Being fly fishermen are into that kind of stuff, which is cool. But I usually will recommend, 7, 8, 9 weight. Any of those would work. Of course, if you have a fly rod, if you say the word, we shouldn't have been talking about this, Dave, because tomorrow the wind's going to be howling now. That
Exactly.
So, anytime you mention fly rod, the wind's going to be blowing. So, I think I always throw one of my 9 weights in the boat whether somebody's bringing their own stuff or not, just in case the wind starts howling and you need a little extra beef to be able to throw it out there a little further. But I would say overall, an 8 weight is probably, if somebody was going to get their first fly rod, I would say an 8 or 9 weight would probably be, because there's other things here you can use that for as well.
Sure.
Jacks being one of the main things, and actually, in fact, right now, this time of year, the jack starts showing up as such a fun fish on the fly rod as well.
I was wanting to start a fishing tournament years ago, and I was going to call it "You Don't Know Jack." Those dudes, they are bruisers, especially when you get them ones out there that are the size of a garbage can lid, and they're running in these big schools. They are beasts. We caught one yesterday. We caught one, or not yesterday, excuse me. We caught one on Monday, which was a few days ago.
We caught one off the beach that was probably pushing 40 pounds. We caught two of them actually.
Wow.
Yeah, we get this time of year in April, March and April, we get these big spawning schools of them right off the beach, right behind where the waves are breaking. And we're mostly out there looking for cobia on the backs of manta rays, which is also awesome. But in the meantime, when you come by a school of a bunch of those jacks, they eat a fly really good. They eat anything really.
Oh, they eat anything.
And most people will catch one and then they're done.
Oh, they are. They're beast.
Those are our jacks. We call them our jacks.
Exactly.
They
I used to throw a wood chopper. I don't know if you've ever heard of one, but it's the top water that's got counter rotating props. And as you're ripping it, they're killing each other trying to get at this thing. It's a blast. It is a blast.
Yeah. Back to your question though, but yeah, I mean, an 8-weight, that was the first fly rod I ever had, was an 8-weight. And it's, I think depending on which brand you buy, there can be some brands, it's a big jump from the 8 to the 9. Like the 9 will feel like a broomstick to somebody compared to that 8. So I think it's you got to kind of look at that too. But, and a 10-weight's not out of the question. I mean, it's not overkill for some days here when the wind's blowing. So
I used a 10 because to get it to turn over a heavier fly. Some of the flies I was throwing was the size of a mud crab, because that's what I was trying to imitate, or a fiddler. So I just needed something that would turn that over and roll with it. But it was interesting that you brought up a 9-weight, because Hansen brought up a 9-weight too. That's his favorite. And the 9-weight in the market is kind of like the forgotten stepchild as far as, when you look at the rod manufacturers, you generally don't see that many offerings for a 9-weight. Yeah. But you two now are into the 9. I may have to pick up a 9. I know that it has a lot more flexibility, that you can handle even probably small tarpon on it.
It's funny, like I was saying, and not naming any manufacturer, but just there's quite a few. If you were at a fly shop and you picked up an 8-weight and then picked up a 9-weight right after you just had the 8-weight in your hand, it's a big jump. But it's I feel like that in here, anywhere probably in Florida these days, the fish are spookier.
Sure.
But getting the longer cast is a big deal. You really, if you're coming here to fish for saltwater fish, and I'm sure it's even plays a bigger role when you're talking bonefish and permit, but even with our redfish here, it puts a big premium on being able to really get it out there. That'll up your chances tremendously, being able to make a long fly cast. And I think a 9-weight for a lot of people is probably going to be an easier rod to get more line out there. Technique and everything else, not talking about any of that, just in general, I think a 9-weight can be slung a little further.
Give you an extra 5 or 10 feet that you normally would not be able to accomplish, or especially if you're fighting with a birdies. And I don't know about.
Now, there's a lot of guys that come out and fish with me with a 6-weight, a 7-weight. I mean, and they're great, and these are great fly, and that doesn't matter to somebody that's really good at it, And I don't fall into that. I don't claim to fall into that category. I can get the fly out there, but I'm not one of those guys that a lot of days I'm not too proud to pick up the bigger rod just because I want a little extra distance, And I think that probably would hold true for a lot of people.
Now, are you loading that 9-weight with a 9-weight line, or are you overloading it and putting like a 10 just to get it to give you a little bit more loading capability?
I've never done the overloading thing. I've never done that. I've never experimented with it, to be honest with you. I've always kind of been happy with kind of matching it with what the rod called for. So I know a lot of people do that and they like it. So, but I've never really done that. So
I did it for a period of time because, as I was telling Hansen when I was having a podcast with him, which was just a great podcast. We learned a lot. I learned to fly cast using a fiberglass rod. They're slow. So by
Okay,
putting
yeah.
a heavier line, I mean, it took me a while to really get the feel of a graphite flight rod. Of course, they're always
Mhm.
changing, they're always improving and getting more expensive every year, in my opinion. But be that as it
Yeah.
may, just putting that little bit heavier line on there, for me, slowed the rod down a little bit to get back to the cadence that I was more used to as a kid when I was throwing fiberglass. I mean,
Right.
I'm talking about a buggy whip. I mean, you had to
Yeah.
stop and wait. It was almost like, if you were going to put it into a shooting analogy, the difference between shooting a modern centerfire rifle versus a flintlock. I mean, the hang time is forever.
Right.
So, I was just curious because I seem to, when I see that combination where somebody has overloaded a rod a little bit, they seem to be a little bit older generation. And I think that's what it
Yeah.
kind of, they're just
Well,
used to a slower rod.
yeah, and I think really it comes down to whatever works for you. I mean,
It's
don't
true. Very true.
just because the cool fly guide that told you not to do it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I mean, if it works for you, it works. And I've had some people on the boat with some very strange fly setups, and they kill it. They cast it like a pro. It's like, hey man, whatever gets it out there, and that's what you need to use. So that's the
Well,
way
it's like
I've always felt about it.
it's like your golf background. It's muscle memory. It's the more times you sit there and strike something, the better you're going to get at it. I totally get that. What about leader
funny
material?
You say that. Real quick, Dave, it's funny you say that about it's in fly fishing. I've said this so many times to people. It reminds me of golf in this way, that with fly fishing, you can, if you go out, you don't have to catch a single fish, but if you make a cast that feels right, where the line rips out and you get all the line out, it slaps the reel when it comes out, that great feeling you get when you make a great cast. It's so much just like a golf shot when you hit it, and it feels so pure, even though the ball hooks and goes into the water. That feeling, I think, for me, a lot of times on both sides of that golf, and that's what kind of kept me coming back. It's like you want to replicate that pure feeling.
That's right.
I just always thought that was kind of cool with fly fishing, was you don't, even if you made don't catch a fish, if you make a couple of those casts a day, I mean, that to me is a lot of times good enough. It's what makes you want to go back and do it again.
Well, and you see these guys that practice that a lot more than I have the time, the opportunity to do. And you're watching them cast, and they're not even working at it. I mean, they're not even looking back to watch the back cast or anything. They just have the feel down. They have the mechanics down. They've got that, some like to use the analogy of 10-2. I like to use the analogy of driving a nail. Let the rod load and then bring it forward, double haul it. And you watch these guys, and it's an art form to watch these lines go out there, and they're so rhythmic with it. And they're not even breaking a sweat.
No, I've been very impressed with a lot of people I've had on the front of my boat, what they can do with it. They can do what a fly rod, what most people can't even do with a spinning rod. You know?
Exactly. What about leader material, and how long do you prefer when it comes to your fly tackle?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I don't know if I have a preference. Our fish, well, no, I take that back. I do. In the wintertime, a 10-foot leader, give or take a little bit. That's because our water is clear. So our fish, right. And these days they're very spooky in the wintertime when the water's clear. So you want to use a long leader, use a fluorocarbon tippet, and go down to, some fairly light line. In the summertime when our water's dirty, I mean, if we're flood tide fishing, you can use a 5-foot leader, because I'm kind of joking there. I mean, we probably don't use a 5-foot leader, but you can use a much shorter leader. It's not as big a deal, because, you're really putting the fly right next to the fish. And a lot of times the fly line's not even in the water when you're doing that flood tide stuff. So, and even if it is, the water's so murky that, it's the fish aren't seeing it that much.
They just don't see it. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely in the wintertime, you want to use, I would say really use as long a leader as you can turn over. I mean, if you can throw a 12-foot leader, that's what I would do. I mean, it just gives you a little better chance of the fish not spooking,
Right. What brands of tackle, rods and reels are you using, and are any of them a sponsor of yours? And if they are, how have you seen that equipment improve over last 5 years?
Yeah. As far as spinning gear, which is what I use the majority of the time on my charters, and I use Shimano reels and G Loomis rods, and they are sponsors of mine. And man, I mean, my clients are spoiled. It's incredible how nice and smooth and light and powerful and all those whatever other adjectives you can come up with.
Sure.
I mean, it's just, in the last 5 years, there has been some improvements, but it just, in my time into fishing, it's amazing. I mean, the new, my charter reels that I use on my charters every day are the new Stratics.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been using them for a couple of years now, and they're just super impressive. I used to get, years ago when I first started guiding, which has been, almost 17 years now, I guess. Reels would last 6 months maybe, and,
right.
and they just because the people on my boat would just, they're just getting a lot of use, and they're in saltwater, obviously. So, but these days, man, I mean, the reels last a lot longer. They stay smooth. They don't make noise. And the rods are just incredibly light. Like I just started, I just got in a few weeks ago, the new G Loomis GCX inshore series rods. It's a new line of rods from G Loomis, and man, I don't know if you've seen them yet, but you've got to pick one.
What's the length
of
them?
I have some that are 7 and some that are 7.6, depending on what we're tossing. I like to, for when we're tossing, like a lot of times we free line little shrimp or little minnows or something. I like to use that 7.6. It's extra fast, so you can kind of flick the tip out there, right, and get the bait out. But in general, I use a 7 all around. I'll use a 7-foot medium fast action. But they're incredible, man. The sensitivity, they're super light, but somehow, even though they're all that, they're real powerful. I mean, we caught one of those 40-pound jacks on the 7.6 on the extra fast rod the other day. So, I mean, I should have taken a picture of this thing. I mean, you would have thought the rod would have exploded, but it handled it no problem. So
it's got plenty of backbone to handle a beast like that.
It does. So I've been super impressed with these new rods. But G Loomis, they make just about everything they've ever made has been pretty high quality, good stuff. And Shimano kind of the same way. And then another thing that's improved a lot is the line. I use that Power Pro V2 Super Slick, and just been really impressed with that. I mean, you get so many less wind knots than we used to.
Right.
It just feels smoother. It doesn't. Back in the day, used to get that kind of old ropey looking stuff after a while. And now this stuff stays smooth for a long, long time. Most people probably they wouldn't have to replace it for a long time,
What pound weight are you running on most of that? 10
pound on all my inshore rods. And
okay.
Then,
on your spinning reel is what you're putting
on the spinning.
10 weight? Mm-hmm.
10. Yeah, 10. Some people do 15 or 20. I like the 10. I feel like it casts just that little bit extra.
Sure. Less resistance.
Yeah. And around here, the main thing when you're fishing, or the thing you got to watch out for as far as breaking fish off, is oysters.
Right.
We have and this is the oyster bar mecca, man. I mean, there's just tons of oysters. Thank God they're here. They keep our water clean.
Oh yeah. But they are definitely redfish condominiums. God, they love those things.
They love them. So, I mean, and they're basically razor blades. They're ultra sharp. And what I've noticed is, if you're using 20 pound or if you're using 10 pound, if they go across an oyster, it cuts the same. There's not a whole lot of difference there. That's how sharp some of the shells are. So I just feel like if I can get a little bit of extra distance with that 10 pound, it's worth using it.
What about leader on that scenario? Are you putting a fluorocarbon leader onto the end of that braid. And what is it, 3 foot, 4 foot? What do you like to throw?
Yeah, I mean, and that depends on, if we're doing some kind of live baiting, I'll generally put a little longer leader on there, maybe a few feet. And it's usually going to be 15 pounds, as low as 15-pound fluorocarbon in the wintertime, but generally 20-pound. And then in the summertime, I'll up it to 25, sometimes even 30, depending on what we're doing. And if I'm throwing lures, if I'm having my people throw lures, I'll obviously shorten that up a little bit to maybe 2 feet, 18 inches sometimes, depending on what we're tossing. The top water, I'll use generally a pretty short leader with the top water.
What brand of leader material do you find handles that razor blade environment and that you're using the most now? Seagar, which one do you like?
They're all pretty good these days. I like, Rick Murphy did the Diamond Fishing products.
Mm-hmm.
I've been using that a lot lately, which has been great. The Seagar stuff is obviously really good stuff too. But yeah, I mean, I used to occasionally would use some mono for topwater fishing because of the little bit of stretch. I kind of thought that, and it probably does give you a little relief from, when you get a bite on the topwater from ripping the hooks out of the fish's mouth. But I pretty much use all fluorocarbon these days. I just think the abrasion resistance is it's really good compared to the mono.
Oh, it is very much so. I mean, I use on my bait casters when I'm for topwater, it's all mono because I like the stretch and I like the fact that it floats. Kind of doesn't pull the lure down as much. And here again, I'm doing that all on bait caster. So I'm throwing a 20-pound or a 17-pound mono. It just doesn't give me the issues with bird nesting is bad or things of that nature. Yeah. But yeah, I'm a big fan.
I'm not busting out the bait. I'm not busting out the bait casters very often. You have to have a signed notary. I need proof of of your ability to throw a bait caster for me to bust those out.
That's my weapon of choice. I love it.
No, I love.
You got to have a smart thumb. That's the key.
You do, and I do have some nice bait casters that I bust out for certain people when they want to use them. And for myself, I'm with you. I love throwing a top water with a bait caster. That's a really fun thing to do.
It is, and you can beat an oyster bed to death. I can outcast as far as fan casting an area with a bait caster just so much more efficiently than with a spinning rod. The spinning rod's going to give you more distance, but when it comes to accuracy and beating it every 3 feet across and walking it through there, just give me the bait caster. Just give me my Daiwa. So that's my game. I love that.
Yeah. That's I'll personally love throwing a top water, and then we also, and this is kind of unique to where I am too. We throw spinner baits fairly often for redfish here. In the summer, our water gets so murky that I really like an inline spinnerbait, but also the R-band.
An inline spinnerbait, interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah, those inline spinnerbaits, you can rig them so they're very weedless. And which is great because at high tide in the summer, for one, the redfish aren't schooled up; they're spread out, and they get up in the grass, or at least into the edges of the grass. And there's not really anything that works. That you can cover more ground with than one of those spinnerbaits. And of course it's making, the vibration and the flash. And then I put a saltwater assassin paddle tail on the back of it. I mean, you kind of got the trifecta of attractants there. And the redfish love it, trout occasionally, but redfish. And then the flounder, believe it or not, the flounder love a spinnerbait. We've caught tons of flounder on those spinnerbaits. So, and it's fun. People that have never done it and they do it, it's addictive because when you're just with the spinnerbait, you're obviously just doing a constant slow retrieve.
That's what I was going to ask you. Are you slow rolling it or are you jigging it?
No, just slow roll it. And when you get that thump from the redfish, man, it's so cool. I mean, there's nothing like that thump that you get,
Oh, they crash it.
I kind of got that from tournament fishing. We did a lot of spinnerbait fishing in those tournaments because you can just cover. It's like a spoon on steroids, kind of. Right.
Right. Well, the biggest redfish I ever caught was on a spinnerbait, but I worked it. I worked it like a jig, so that it had that flash aspect when it was falling. It looked like a pinfish or something twisting real quick. And it was a big female. She thumped it. But I wasn't slow rolling it. I would just reel it up and then let it slowly helicopter down and jumped all over it. But yeah, I love that. If somebody was going to get a start into this sport, what would you recommend to them when it comes to gear that just doesn't cost a king's ransom? What do you like to recommend?
Yeah, I would say, reach out to somebody that is into it, and aside from listening to what I'm about to tell you, but I mean, these days I feel like most people that are in the tackle shop, fly shop, whatever it is, they're really helpful. I mean, they can really be helpful with that kind of thing, and they can set you up with what you need. But I mean, if I was just getting into and you wanted to spin fish, Shimano, they're what I would consider their less expensive, lower end reels are phenomenal. I mean, they feel like a high end reel. It's really pretty impressive. And you don't have to spend an arm and a leg, and the same thing with the rods. I mean, but the other side of that is, if you're going to get into it, and this, I'm guilty of this in every hobby I've ever had, whether it be music, golf, fishing, whatever it is, I like nice stuff. So there's something to be said about spending a little extra money and getting something that's going to last you longer, and something that you can enjoy for a longer time. And
it's saltwater. It's corrosive. It eats up everything.
Right. So I mean, you can look at it either way, but I mean, really, there are some of that lower end stuff these days that doesn't cost that much is pretty good. They've improved it. It's a vast improvement over years past from what the lower cost reels and rods were. And I'm trying to think of the Shimano that my friend of mine that lives down the road from me just bought. What is it? The Sahara. Anyways, one of the ones down the line, and I was fishing off his dock the other day with it, and I'm like, man, this feels great. It feels awesome. It does not feel like it was like a $50 reel or something.
Right,
it was like,
right.
It feels like a $300 reel. It felt really good. I was impressed.
What about fly tackle, as far as somebody looking? And that, as you know, that sport can be, if you're not careful, can get expensive quick. And I get on my soapbox about that every now and then, saying, look, guys, some of this stuff, I get it. I understand the quality that goes into it, but $1,000 for a rod, when you're trying to recruit people into the sport, that's a little tough to swallow. It's a little tough for me to swallow. So,
yeah. I mean, you can look at it. I mean, I consider, I have a wall of fly rods that I keep out in my, where I store my boats in my garage. And they're like, we talked about it earlier. It's like a shrine, right? It's like, I display them like they're works of art, which I feel like they are. But no, I think it goes back again. Go to don't order something online. Don't do that. Don't just look at it and order it. Go to your fly shop. Those guys, your local fly shop, they're super helpful. I mean, I know these guys here, like there's Black Fly up in Jacksonville, and then there's a new one going to open here in St. Augustine. Those guys, they will get you into whatever you need to get into. They're not going to try to sell you on the big ticket thing right off the bat. I mean, I think you could probably get into a pretty decent fly setup for a few hundred bucks, at least to start out. And then I think the one downside to that is a lot of the less expensive rods tend to be slower rods, which I think is probably good for starting out. But I think it is too.
I think it is.
Once they get into it, they're going to want something with a little faster action, and probably you're going to have to fork out some dough for that, but it's worth it,
Other than redfish, which I know is a real popular fish in that area due to all those oyster beds and stuff that you have up there. What else do you target? Do you target tarpon? That's probably seasonal for you, if I'm not mistaken, being that far north. And then I heard you mention flounder, which they're phenomenal tasting fish. Do you specifically target those at times? What's your ecosystem like?
Yeah, we do. I mean, redfish is our year-round staple. I mean, they're the go-to all the time. They're warm, cold, freezing cold. Even, I mean, they impress me sometimes with as cold as it's got. I've seen the water in the 40s, and the redfish are still as aggressive as ever. So, redfish are the year round, and then the tarpon, which is my second fish I obsess over. That is a warmer month. During the warmer months, that's when we have our tarpon. But usually I would tell people, May is probably a good starting point for when we start seeing the tarpon, the migrating tarpon, a few of them showing up. But on Monday and Tuesday of this week, and we're talking, towards the end of March now, I've seen some big tarpon in the intercoastal here, which is
that's early, isn't it, for you?
It's really early. And yesterday we jumped 2 tarpon, smaller ones, 20, 30 pounders.
Sure. Oh, they're a blast. I love them.
Oh yeah. Super. Yeah. Really fun fish. But, so starting, I'm going to, like I said, I would say May, but definitely, June, July, August, September, and then halfway through October, a lot of times, with August and September probably being some of the coolest, because of the mullet run happening. Right. We get some absolute giant beasts around that time of year, chasing those big mullet. And that's probably, I'll tarpon fish 4 days a week and do other things the other 2 days, that during that time, if they're around, I get pretty ate up with chasing tarpon. They're just so cool.
Now for you, that's mostly an offshore game, is it not?
It can be. I mean, we a lot of the tarpon fishing we do off the beach here, because that's where our menhaden or pogies, as we call them, those big schools of those bait fish, they're in there eating those. And then they also get behind the shrimp boats, which is another kind of sort of unique thing here, where the shrimpers will dump their bycatch, which consists of little croakers and other little smaller fish, and the tarpon will get back there, and it's like the gravy train,
Oh yeah, they're just strapping the feed sack on.
Which it sounds cheesy because you're chumming them up or whatever, but it's actually really pretty cool deal to watch that fish, the tarpon coming down that line of fish eating them. And that's actually a great time to toss a lure or a fly at them. We don't get a whole lot of sight fishing opportunities for tarpon per se, because our water is murky that time of year when they're around. So, I mean, you can see them rolling and obviously cast and all that, but we don't get a lot of like you would in the Keys or somewhere where the water's clear. You don't see a lot of fish just laying around and cast to them. But when they're behind those shrimp boats, you will see them because the water tends to be clear out in the ocean. And so you can sight fish them. So that's really fun, but we get a good amount. And actually, just for me personally, the last couple of years, I've kind of focused in a little bit on finding them a little more on the inshore side. And last year, I have a couple of areas that nobody else really fishes, which is really pretty nice. Inshore, where I can pull the boat to some big fish. That occasionally you do get that laid up, tailing, backing fish. So, but yeah, I think the majority of our big fish are caught either in the inlets, around the bridges, or along the beach or behind the shrimp boats.
What about big trout, big female trout? Do you?
Yeah, that's today we were talking about earlier. We had a young girl on the boat today caught about a 5-6 pound trout.
That's nice.
This March, April into May is when we catch a lot of those gator trout. I don't really target trout that much. There's a lot of guys that do. I just, I'm more into the redfish and flounder, but mainly because the trout, at 15, 16 inches isn't a huge drag screaming type of deal. No. But when you talk
ski
about
trout,
a trout,
that's why I call them. You just ski them in.
Yeah, ski them in.
Here you go.
But when you're talking about a trout that gets to 4 pounds and bigger, 5 pounds bigger, that's a different animal, and that's a beast. Really fun fish to target. So yeah, if whether it be top waters or if somebody's live bait fishing, we'll drift a big live shrimp or a subsurface, some kind of subsurface bait, whatever it is, however you do it. Top water being my favorite way to do it.
Oh yeah, I love targeting with topwater, and a lot of times some of the bigger trout I caught when they first hit, I thought it was a snook
Yeah, I could see
because they
that
act
for
just
sure.
like it. You know, a big
They do.
21, 23-inch trout. They act just like a snook.
Yeah. In fact, in the last few years, we have, it kind of leads us to another species is snook. We have our snook population has exploded. We actually have, I used to kind of joke about, if somebody said, I want to do a snook charter, I would say, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to take you to go catch snook. We might catch one as a bycatch when we're looking for something else. But these days you can almost say that. I mean, there's a good population. We don't get a lot of big ones, but we actually have a decent population of snook, even in Jacksonville.
What
The
are they
guys are
hovering
catching quite a
around
few.
a freshwater influx for the water temperature? Because you know as well as I do, they're very sensitive to water temperature.
They are. And in 2010, I think it was, when we had that real bad freeze, a
Oh,
lot of
that was
them,
miserable.
died. Yeah. But even this year it froze a little bit, a couple of days, and I didn't hear of any of them die, any kills or whatever.
Right.
But yes, that you're right though. I think typically you catch them around or in some of these bigger creek systems that at one point or another, if you go far enough up, they turn into fresh water.
Right.
So that's, we have like Pellicer Creek and Moultrie Creek, and then Pablo Creek and then the St. Johns River. They catch a lot of them in the St. Johns River these days. So, but what I was telling you was there's a lot of times we'll get bit and the fish will jump and I'll go, oh, it's a big snook. No, wait. No, what is it? No, it's a big, it's a trout.
Big trout, big gator trout.
Yeah.
I love them.
Because you don't expect a lot of times that really big 6, 7, 8 pound trout. I've never got one over 10 pounds. I've had actually quite a few of them just shy of 10 pounds, and a lot of them in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I don't weigh them anymore. I try to be really, really careful with those big fish. We try to get a really quick picture and get them right back in the water.
Yeah, those big females.
I would say that if we did get one that I thought was over 10 pounds, I probably would have to figure out a way to weigh it real quick. But anyways, yeah, we have a good population of big trout, but it is seasonal. We typically catch them in the spring, and then again in the fall, we get a pretty good run of them then too. And then the flounder is probably, second to the redfish is one of the more popular inshore fish. Flounder is a big deal here. A lot of guys are into flounder gigging, which I'm not actually a huge fan of, but if you want to catch a big doormat flounder, this is a good place to come. I mean, people catch them over 10 pounds, pretty frequently. Mostly that happens in the late summer and fall when the big mullet are around. Those big flounder come out to feed on those.
I don't know how it is in that area, but I know if I was always catching flounder, it was in an area where the water was always moving. It was like a pinch point. In other words, the bait had to come to them. They can't run anything down. So it was a tidal creek that had a neck down point, sort of like somebody who would fly fish for trout in a stream. They're looking for a pinch point where the water's flowing through. Do you find flounder up there in that same scenario? They've got to have almost a constant water movement in one direction or the other to find them in any kind of consistency.
Yeah, when you're talking like backcountry type stuff, or inshore, that's what people would call it here. If you're in the creeks and stuff like that, a great place to look for those guys is if you're in a bigger creek. There's going to be a lot of little tiny outlets coming out of the marsh. These little tiny, there might be 2 feet wide, it might be 10 feet wide, but on the bottom of the tide or the last couple hours, the outgoing tide, those little mouths tend to be pretty good. Not the bigger creek mouths, the bigger, deeper ones, not so much, but those little ones, and you can see the ones that are going to be better. They're the ones that you'll see all the little tiny little bait fish. If the finger mullet around, the finger mullet will be there, or the mud minnows or whatever it is. But yeah, that's a rig that everybody uses here with a ton of success is just a 1/8 or 1/4 ounce jig head with a mud minnow or a mullet or a soft plastic paddle tail, and you just slowly drag it along those areas. And yeah, they stack up there. I mean, you can catch, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 fish sometimes in one little, little tiny little spot. They just sit there and wait for that bait to come by.
It's got to come to them.
Right.
And are you jigging that, or are you just slow rolling it through there just off of the bottom? What technique are you finding where you get the most activity on?
Yeah, I mean, if live bait, you're going to just want to drag it. Just drag it, But I mean, with the paddle tail, yeah, just hopping it. I wouldn't say you don't want it to get too far up in the water column, but that being said, we've had a fair number of flounder that my clients have caught on topwater plugs.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I mean, when you're throwing a topwater plug in a foot of water, they're plenty aggressive enough. I mean, during the summer, which is a good time to flounder fish as well. There's tons of smaller and some good sized flounder in the flats, and you'll see them airing out like doing their little baby tarpon impression. I mean, they'll pick up and jump out of the water. So they can be aggressive, but I would say in general, you want to be close to the bottom. That's what they're doing. They're sitting there in the mud waiting for something to swim by.
Talk to me about clothing items. I know you're a big fan of bamboo type material. What brands and stuff are you, if you're sponsored by any of them, what are you finding keeps you the most comfortable out there on the flats all day long?
Yeah, I'm not, I don't really have a clothing sponsor per se, but I am definitely into the bamboo shirts. I've always kind of struggled with the polyester ones. I was joking with you earlier. I feel like a lot of times it's just hot. It just feels hot to me for some reason, even the ones that are wicking, but a lot of the bamboo stuff to me just feels cooler. And I don't get that heat rash that, how it is in the summer. I'm out.
Oh, some of them's like wearing a garbage bag. I get it.
Right. In the summer, when you're out there 5-6 days in a row and the heat index is 110, you want to do whatever you can to stay a little cooler. So I'd say the only downside to some of the bamboo is it's I think it was the UPF, the sun protection isn't quite there as much as it is with some of the polyester stuff. So you do have to be kind of careful with that. You can, some of them are pretty thin. You can still get a little sunburn through them. So I depending on what I'm wearing, sometimes I will put a little sunblock on my shoulders and stuff. But, the free fly stuff is nice. Bahio sunglasses sent me some recently that are bamboo that are similar to those. And those are really nice. What's the other company I have? The duck camp stuff, all those bamboo ones are pretty nice. I don't know if I have an absolute favorite, but I'm a bamboo guy these days. I'll still wear some of the other shirts, during the when it's a little cooler, but when it's really hot out, I tend to gravitate towards those bamboo, the ones made out of bamboo for sure.
Now, are these a button up or a pullover with a hoodie? What style do you prefer? I mean, I'm a big fan of button up, but I'm old school. But
yeah, I like the look of the button up, but man, I'm a hoodie, 110% hoodie guy. I mean, my neck a couple of years ago, I looked at myself in the mirror and I'm going, man, I'm starting to get like the leather neck look going.
Looking like a turkey. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going, man, as much as I'm in the sun and as much as I was in the sun as a kid, I mean, surfing we didn't talk about surfing was a huge passion of mine growing up. I never wore sunblock. So I know in the next few years, I'm going to be in trouble. I'm sure I'll be cut on many times.
Somebody's going to start carving on you. Right?
Yeah. And I have been already, so knowing that I need to stay out of the sun as much as possible. I love the hooded shirts. I think I can't believe somebody didn't think of this years ago, but it's great. I wear a buff in the cooler months or a face shield or whatever you want to call them, a neck gaiter. They have a lot of names these days, but and when it's hot, I cannot keep that thing on my face. It just bothers me. It's too hot for me. But having a hat and then pulling up that hood, man, it's a lifesaver. It really keeps the sun off your ears, your neck, and that being said, I still cover I slop the sunblock on every morning as well. So, but yeah, the hood, I'm in the hood, man.
You're in the hood. Do you have a color preference to help blend in with the sky? Or
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've ever looked into it that much, but I think it probably plays to what I like. I mean, I like blue. I mean, you can look at everything I own as blue. So, I mean, light blues and
azul
light
blue.
grays. Yeah, I mean, my boats currently are blue. So, but yeah, blue. I like a blue shirt or white. I think it's just like you said. I mean, for one, it's probably the coolest from the sun hitting you, and then also if you're thinking, camouflaged from the fish, it's probably, although they make
Fish-o-flage.
crazy camouflage fish shirts, which I think are kind of funny, but white or blue is probably your best bet. Of course, that's what the sky looks like, I guess, so why not?
What about sunglasses? What do you like?
Yeah.
What have you worked with? What do you prefer as far as lens material, colors?
So, yeah, I mean, right now, I am super happy with what I have for sunglasses, and that's the Bahio sunglasses, which is a Florida company. A lot of the guys that left another company recently started this one about a year ago. Was when they started, and man, the lenses are they're just so clear. The contrast when you're sight fishing is pretty incredible. They have a pretty big selection of different lenses, but right now what I really like, I mean, I've always liked the green mirror.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's a great all-around lens. Good contrast. It's it's dark at times, can be a little dark for me, but I've been using, Bahio makes a rose mirror lens, which is kind of a pinkish reddish color when you're looking at them from the outside, but they more of a yellow amber, light amber tint when you're looking through them. And man, they're
more
just
of a
incredible.
low, what you would consider a low light lens.
Yeah, that's what you would think but I wear them all day long. In fact, I initially got them to wear as a low light lens, but I've been wearing them all day long, and I've been really happy with them. The Bahio has some technology that blocks a lot of the harmful blue light, and which is something that nobody else in the fishing space has done before. And what that does is, at least to my somewhat uneducated self, as far as lenses go, it makes it look like it's like the difference between regular and HD, if that makes any sense.
It does. It's like, well, I have a pair of Bahios. I love them.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it just seems really crispy, and just your eyes. What it allows you to do is allows your eyes to relax.
That's it.
So
relax. I'm not squinting.
At the end of the day, yeah. So at the end of the day, if you're spending 8 to 10 hours a day on the water, your eye fatigue is going to be pretty severe. So anything you can do to prevent that eye fatigue is a big deal. And these things, I am sponsored by them and everything, but I'm not just saying this because I am. I would get headaches a lot of times, especially on those long days, especially when it was real sunny out. I do not get those headaches when I'm wearing these glasses. I mean, and that has really, really impressed me. Aside from the fact that I think you could see into the water better. I think the technology that they have right now is the best one going for sure.
I'll have to give those rose ones a try. I have the green because that's, over the years, we've all tried different brands, whether it was Costas or Ocean Waves or, and we all kind of gravitated towards that, what we call it, flat
green
screen.
Mirror.
Yeah, the green mirror lenses.
And that is a great lens. I mean, I think in bright light, bright sun, I think it's hard to beat that combination.
What do you feel is the number one mistake anglers make that just kills their strike ratio when they're out there? Is it lack of cover scent? Is it boat noise? I mean, you have people on your bow almost every day. What do you see as the biggest mistake they make?
I love that question. I really do, because I feel very strongly that it's a noise thing. I think that, I mean, it can be a number of things, but I think most importantly and least, I think, thought about thing is the noise factor, because, back in the day, everybody's pulling their boat around, being pretty quiet, no big deal. It's, A little hull slap, I don't think even that's that big of a deal for most fish around, or did used to be anyways. These days, of course, everybody has trolling motors, which is cool, which is fine. But I think a lot of people don't understand how much noise and how those fish react, how much noise those trolling motors can make if they're not using them the right way. And the fish react. I mean, it amazes me. Let me just give you a scenario. This is what kind of where I'm coming from. This is a few weeks ago. I was on a flat. There was nobody else on this flat at the time. It's a big flat. I don't know how big, but it's big. It was first thing in the morning, slicked out, calm conditions. And this is when it was still cooler out and there were some schools of redfish around. So I'm up there. We're actually staked out. We're power poled down. We're waiting for these fish to come to us instead of chasing them, which is a good technique if you can figure that out.
Exactly.
But, so we're sitting there waiting, and another boat comes to the edge of the flat, shuts his motor off, which is good. And then troll motors up on the flat, which is the same thing I did, which is fine. But once on the flat, he was using his trolling motor on a high speed. And the fish that were almost in range of us, which were, a long ways away from this guy, bumped up and hauled butt and were gone. So, maybe 10 years ago, the fish weren't that sensitive to it, but I feel like these days that trolling motor noise, it's like somebody coming over a loudspeaker and saying, get out of Dodge, leave, danger, danger, danger. So I think, the fish, they're just going to get more and more sensitive to that kind of stuff. So I think if you can really kind of think about what you're doing with that trolling motor and come in quietly, and then when you're using the trolling motor, try to stay at a constant speed, a constant low speed.
Constant low speed.
Yeah, constant.
Or better yet, let the wind blow you in.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying anybody's doing anything necessarily wrong. It's just, I think to get to fish these days, you have to be aware of the amount of noise that you're making, because I think you don't realize how far away those fish can feel you or hear you or whatever you want to call it. It's crazy. When I'm on we have some big flats here, and when you get on them and you start that trolling motor up, and then you see the fish hump up, 300 yards away from you, and it's like,
you're flushing them out like quail.
Right. And really, your chances of catching a fish once you've bumped them up with a trolling motor, even if it's 300 yards away, goes down significantly. I mean, way down. You have so much better of a chance of getting one to eat whatever it is you're throwing at them if you get up to them without them knowing you're there, obviously. But yes, I think that's definitely the number one thing. And it can be this, it's not just the trolling motor, it can be moving around the boat, or I get the old, slamming the cooler, because people just don't, people that aren't quote unquote fishermen, they don't realize that when you're in a foot of water, if they stand up and stomp on the boat, that noise carries so far.
It does.
And I have to remind people, as a fishing guide, and I'm sure this happens to a lot of fishing guides, it's, there's kind of a little bit of a fine line. You don't want to, somebody comes from the bottom, they're inside the boat and they step up onto the deck and they thump the deck, and you want to scream, but you just say, hey, look, hey, you got to try to be light on your feet. But a lot of times at that point, it's too late. That's the fish are
you already flushed them out. That's right.
They're gone. So yeah, I would say, if anybody takes anything away from what we're talking about at all, be stealthy. No matter how you're going to go about doing it, whether you're poling or trolling motoring or drifting or whatever it is, be stealthy. You will catch, I promise you will catch more fish if you are as stealthy as you can be.
Well, I used to be really fanatical with one boat that I had. It had one of them bilge pumps that would seek water every so often. Well, I wired that dude, turned it off. So I'd come in on the flat, and I would, if the wind couldn't blow me in, and I would just use the trolling motor as slow as I could, just to crawl up onto them, and then shut it down, or try not to even change the speed on it. And just,
right.
I told one guy, he says, we were fishing one time, and I said, you don't understand how loud that trolling motor is. I said, lay your head down on the deck right now and listen to it.
Yeah.
You don't hear it because it's off the bow, and if it's thrashing water around, you may not necessarily hear it. I said, but lay your head down on the deck, you'll hear it. You might as well be running out there and beating a bass drum around.
Yeah, you can imagine the fish are hearing it better than you are. And, and I've been in the water, we go to the Keys every year on a vacation, and just for the heck of it, got in the water, not being dangerous and getting run over or anything, and heard the sound of you. If you ever get the chance, put your head in the water. If you're in the water, not even close, just 50 feet away from a boat with the trolling motor on, and see how much sound you can hear. It's loud. It is. Now I will say this. I will say trolling motors these days are generally quieter than they used to be. And I think there's some new stuff. I know there's some new stuff about to come out that's going to, I think, blow people's minds how quiet it is. So hopefully that'll help a little bit.
That's right.
Again, just, if you can pole. If you can't, then ease in and just try to be as quiet as you can. You will catch. There's nothing you can do that'll make you catch more fish than being quiet.
Talk to me about skiffs and bay boats. It's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, man.
What are you now running? Give me the strong suits and give me some weak points, because you and I both know there's no such thing as a perfect boat.
Right. Well, Dave, I'd like to think that I've got all the bases covered with what I've got going on. So I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah, you are. You've got two of them.
Right now, and for the past few years, I've been running a Maverick skiff and a Pathfinder bay boat. I currently have the 18 HPX, and I have the 23 or 2300 HPS 23-foot Pathfinder bay boat, which, for me, for where I fish, they both that covers pretty much everything I need to do. Now, the Pathfinder really alone covers everything, because it drafts a foot or less, and it can really do just about everything, other than it doesn't have a poling platform. It's a little too big to pole. So that's one of the main reasons I really like to have a skiff, because I still enjoy, and of course the skiff goes a little shallower as well.
Sure.
But strong points, you start with the skiff. I mean, I'm in love with this current one I have. And I've liked all of them a lot, and this one, it just blows me away. It's it's fast, which that isn't even these days isn't really a big deal to me, but it is fast if you want it to be. But it rides incredibly soft for a skiff that drafts sub 8 inches, or 8 inches, or depending on who you have on it, it's probably a 7 to 9 inch boat. But it just fishes so nice. It's for what some people would consider a big poling skiff. It really poles like a smaller boat. And in fact, I have a lot of clients that have like Hell's Bays and smaller, almost like micro skiff type boats. And they all, how it is when you're on somebody's boat, and I'll let my clients do it. They'll always say, well, let me pole for a minute.
Sure.
Check this thing out. And they've all been very impressed with that. This is the carbon fiber edition, which takes a little bit of weight out of the boat, but even aside from the carbon.
Yeah, you have the all carbon 18 HPX. If I'm not mistaken, Maverick was able to cut, about 200 pounds out of the 18 by going to the all carbon model.
Yeah, I think it's something right around there. Yeah, it's which is cool, and it does, I think it does have a little bit of different feel to it. But I think, even that being said, even just the non-carbon fiber version is so much light. The way they could make them these days, they're so crazy. Light and so strong, and just it's a very nimble skiff for an 18-foot boat, and as wide as it is, and it's stable. It's a very stable boat. I have a lot of older clients that appreciate the stability of it, and but it's also very even though it's big, it's technical. I mean, you can get in some really skinny water. It's ultra quiet. It goes back to the stealthy part. There's never any hull slap or anything like that. Weaknesses for that boat. God, I mean, I didn't think about it until you just asked it, but I really can't think of a weakness.
Well, you
I mean,
usually trade yours out, what, every year or so?
the skips, I kind of just play it by ear, but it ends up being every couple years or so. And the only reason I do that is because, it just kind of it keeps me in the game with some of the newer accessories, even
Sure.
with the boat not necessarily changing, whether it be the GPS unit or the power pole stuff or trolling motor or whatever it is, or the charger. The power pole charge is amazing.
Right.
So that it kind of goes to that, and then also the engine hours things. As much as I fish, I do put I do put quite a few hours on them. Although most of my time is spent in the bay boat. I spend less time in the skiff than the bay boat. And that's just because of the clients that I have. Not that's so that's why I tend to keep the skiff a little bit longer. I don't put as many hours on it. And I just like skiff. I'm like you. I'm a boat nerd. I love boats. I love looking at boats, being in different boats, and I get excited putting a new one together. It's another passion of mine.
I love it. I love it.
It's and I always have a lot of fun doing it. It can be a little bit of a chore to do it as well, because it's hard to get everything lined up or just right. And then, just when you
Amen.
think you've got, you got your boat set up just the way you like it, you end up getting a new one and then starting over. But I've got it pretty wired these days with the Mavericks and the Pathfinders, and I'm super happy with it. There's really no downside to that 18-foot skiff for me for the HPX. I mean, if it was the only boat I had, I would be really happy with it. You could run the beach. It's big enough to run our beach here on most summer days, and which is cool. I mean, you could be out fishing a reef wreck right off the beach, and then you could come in and fish in 10 inches of water, no problem, the same day, which is pretty cool. And I feel safe in that boat. It's big enough and seaworthy enough and all that to do that. So the Pathfinder is such a beast, man. I mean, it rides. It's incredible how great that boat rides. I mean, everybody that's ever been in my 2300s, I mean, that's at least 2 or 3 times a trip. They look back at me and say, "God, this boat rides so good through any kind of nasty chop." And it's just comfortable, stable. It's vacuum bags built like it's just built really, really well. The layout for me, I think, and I might be off on this a little bit, but Rick Murphy had at least some amount, if not a lot, of input on the design of that boat. I think it was originally kind of designed as a tournament redfish boat.
Right.
And which I can appreciate coming from that. And so that particular model doesn't have all the creature comforts of some of their other models, doesn't have the flip up seats and stuff. But if you're a hardcore fisherman,
right?
Yeah. And that's not to say that it's not comfortable. I mean, it is. I mean, it's still comfortable as well, but man, it's a fishing machine. I could tell you that if I took you on it and we were floating around in some of the stuff I float in, your mind would be blown. You'd be like, I can't believe we're sitting here in this big boat floating in what we're floating in. It's super impressive.
Well, fully loaded. What is she drafting with? Full fuel and bait and customers and cameramen. What are you drafting on that particular one? Do you know? I know you just got a new one, so I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess somewhere, depending on where everybody's at and what you have in it, it's probably as little as 11 inches, probably give or take a little bit either way. It just depends. I mean, with 2 guys on the front of the boat and everything else loaded down, I mean, I don't know. I've gone over some stuff that I think is kind of crazy for a boat like that. And of course, now these days I have the boat's lighter because of the stuff that's on it is lighter. The motors, lighter. The specifically for me, the batteries. I use one 48-volt lithium battery now instead of 3 big AGM batteries, which takes out a ton of weight.
Oh yeah, it's amazing how light those batteries are.
Yeah, I'm using a battery from a company called Lithium Battery Warehouse. They're kind of local. They're actually in Jacksonville, and that battery weighs, I think it's about 32 pounds, or somewhere right around in there, and it's I mean, God, I was using 3 batteries that weighed like 65 pounds a piece before. So you essentially take a whole person out of the boat when you do that. So, and that boat will scoot as well. I mean, you can put the right prop on it, it'll go in the mid 60s. So,
what engine do you have on your Pathfinder?
I have the 250 Yamaha SHO, and they kind of
find that hull is as quiet as the Maverick skiff, or do you get some hull popping in it? How does that equate? Because I know that Pathfinder, back when Scott was involved, they did a lot of design work that crossed it over from the Maverick. A lot of the little small things that you didn't see, a lot of them have, like under gunnel rod storage, which I think is phenomenal. I mean, there's some bay boats today that don't even have that. How quiet is that hull?
It's it's not as quiet as the Maverick,
sure,
because it does have some strakes, or what do they call those?
So it's got a harder chine.
It does have a couple little chines. I mean, but it's never made enough noise for me to think about. I've never thought about it making noise, but it does probably. It's not going to be quite as quiet as the Maverick, but the trade-off there is the dryness. I mean, I've been running that boat. I've had, I think, 5 of them, maybe 6 of them, and I still don't think I've ever got wet in that boat, other than if it was raining. I mean, it's so dry. It's incredible. The Pathfinder is incredibly, that 2300 incredibly dry. It really is impressive how dry.
Well, I know it's a stable boat. Of course, so is the 18 Maverick. It's a very stable boat. I mean, some of these skiffs that I've been on were like war canoes. I'm like, no, I'll stand here. You just want to take a deep breath and don't move. And God forbid the guy's up on the polling platform. The funniest thing I ever saw was a polling platform. And I know they're stable. It's just the appearance. Was a polling platform on a canoe. I'm like, I'm not getting up there. This thing's going to turtle my body up there real quick.
I'm with you. I mean, I like to have a little bit of stability. I'm a big guy. I'm like almost 6'4" and close to 200 pounds, and a stable boat's good. But I mean, even as big as that Maverick would be as far as polling skiffs go, or technical polling skiffs, it doesn't fish that way. It fishes like a smaller boat, which people are looking for. You want it to be as easy to pole around and spin around and all that kind of stuff, and it does all that. I think, to me, it's a perfect balance of polability, stability, and fishability. I mean, it's got all that stuff going for it, and the freeboard, I think, is just right as well. Like, some skiffs sit super low to the water, and some sit a little high out of the water. To me, the Maverick, all 3 of them, they sit just right, in my opinion.
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah, some of them are really low, so you're always getting wet, and some of them are so high it's the sail effect. It's blowing you across the flat. There's a happy medium there, that's for sure. So, what engine are you running on your Maverick? Are you running the 115 show motor on it?
I am. Yep. Yeah, I think that's a perfect match for that boat. Unless you're, if you're a big tournament guy or something, you need extra speed. They obviously can put a 150, and you can have a rocket ship with that on there. But in my opinion, I think that 115, it suits it just about right. I think it's perfect.
Well, when I get a chance to ride on yours, it's going to be interesting to see the differences between the full carbon, and the, as I call it, half carbon model. Just to see the differences in how it runs and how it rides. My concern,
I've had both. I've had the regular version as well, and it's slight. There's a subtle difference, but I'd be curious to see what you think.
Well, I was asking Hansen about that because he's had both also, and my concern with being all carbon. Correct, you're cutting some weight out of it, but it is stiffer. Mm-hmm. I was more concerned about the bang effect of it just banging on you going across that rumble chop and stuff. And he told me, Dave, I don't feel a difference between the two, other than with the carbon model just riding higher in the water column, which is to be expected. Yeah. It weighs less. It's all things being equal.
I agree with what he said. I don't notice. I have been in carbon boats where I do notice that a little bit, but this one I have not noticed that at all. And I know exactly what you're talking about, but no, I have not noticed it. They did not change the bottom, the hull of the boat.
Right.
So the hull still is carbon Kevlar, not all carbon.
Right.
So that might be part of that reason there,
Well, I'm sure the carbon Kevlar is going to deaden some of that effect.
Yeah.
Just from the design of the weave and the material itself. And I saw that Rick had a video put up on an all carbon model Pathfinder. I think it was a 2300.
Yeah.
Are they making that yet, or was that just a prototype, or was he the lucky one that said, "Hey, make it all out of carbon for me," and they did it? Do you know what their design intent was on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were experimenting with it. I don't think Rick actually got one. I think they made one and sold it. They had one at the boat show a couple of years ago at the Miami Boat Show. Awesome looking boat. I mean, all the carbon accents were really cool looking. I didn't really get into that with them much. I didn't talk to them about it a whole lot. I know they did sell a couple of them, so I guess they were offering them. I don't know if they still are or not, but I'd imagine it'd be pretty neat to see, how much weight it would take out. But
I would think it would take 3, 4, maybe more 100 pounds out of it just being fiber.
I mean, it would probably be pretty cool. But really, I don't see a need to improve that hull the way it sits now. It works. I think it works so great as it is, but of course, there's always room for improvement. I guess.
Sure. Technology is always moving forward.
I'd be curious to take a ride. I have not ridden one. I walked or checked the one out that was at the boat show a couple of years ago, but I don't know. I don't know. But I have to ask one of the guys there about that. I'm not sure.
If someone's on a budget and they're looking to do some upgrades to their particular skiff, what do you feel is the best upgrade that they can make bang for the buck to improve their success ratio? Do you feel a power pole, which I've always had one and always will, love them to death. Trolling motor, what do you feel in your area would be the most cost-effective route for them to take to upgrade theirs?
Right. Well, I would say push pole. Get a push pole before you get anything else. But
it's true.
But that most guys probably have a push pole. But Dave, I think that's such a person by person kind of thing, because if you do pole the boat a lot, you would be better off getting to me, a power pole is just, it makes life so easy.
Yes.
I mean, oh my gosh, I have 2 on the bay boat and 1 on the skiff, but I've had 2 on the skiff before too. It's just, it really is just incredibly, it makes everything easier, for where I am, there's something that probably people don't talk about a lot, but like in the Keys, or probably even a little bit where you are, if you were to stake out with your push pole, which has been something people have been doing forever, since they started pulling boats, you're doing that into some sand. If you do that here where I am, you will have the nastiest, muckiest mud on the end of you will not want to touch your push pole the rest of the day.
No, I bet. And with all that shell, it's probably tearing that expensive push pole up.
Exactly. And it'll also the oysters will really, so that's not that. And some people do that, which kind of amazes me still, but it's not really an option here. We almost always pull with the foot of the push pole. We don't ever push with the point up here. It's just
with the spike,
too soft. It's just, it's just so soft here. And it's in the muck in some areas it's really, really deep. So anyways, that power pole comes in super handy. So, a guy that pulls his boat, hands down, a power pole would be the biggest thing. But, kind of the way I see most people fishing these days is off a trolling motor. And it is, if you fish by yourself the majority of the time, then, trolling motor is probably your best friend, so I think it,
again, what works best for your needs. That's for sure.
Yeah. Really, but I'll tell you what you need to do really is just save a little money and get both, because both is really good. Yeah. Although, a lot of times,
if you had to live without one, it would be a toss up.
Yeah. I would say most of the time when I take my skiff these days, and this is just me personally, because I don't have my trolling motor on the boat. Because if I'm taking my skiff, I'm taking it because I want to pole. But that's me. I have another boat that I take when I use a trolling motor. So I'm in a kind of a unique position there. But yeah, so I just think it depends on what you're wanting to do. I think a lot of people get in to skiffs these days when they might maybe really should have thought about getting into a bay boat.
Yeah, better served.
Because a lot of bay boats like this 2300, it drafts the trolling motor. It'll draft as shallow as the trolling motor will run. So and a lot of people get skiffs. In fact, I know a guy that, a couple guys here in the last year that are clients of mine that have gotten skiffs, and I don't think they've ever poled them. And I think they would have been a lot better off looking into a bay boat. So that goes back again to like what you're going to do. If you're going to pole the boat, even just sometimes, skiff is what you need to look at. But if you're not going to pole it, a bay boat might be, it gives you more here at least, and probably a lot of places, it gives you more options, to fish a little bigger water and all that kind of stuff too. So
is the Pathfinder model that you have, is it a step pole?
It is. Yeah, it is.
So you've run both the step haul and a non-step. What do you feel is the advantages, and do you notice any differences in the ride characteristics between the two?
Yeah, definitely. You can just, there's a feel to it for sure above anything else. You can feel when it kind of lifts on them, but that's the right way to say it. But when it gets to the point where it's running behind that, when the boat's behind that step, it definitely has a little different feel to it. I think as far as the Pathfinder line goes, the 24, which is a real popular boat up where I am, is also a great riding boat. It's got, it's got a little more freeboard, and it's not as fast a looking boat. It rides a little more on the back of the boat.
Probably a little bit more dead rise to it.
Yeah, and it just, for me, this is more of the Porsche of bay boats. The stepped hulls, you can ride it around like a skiff. You can run it through little creeks, and I think they just handle great with those steps in them. I've been really impressed with it.
Have you noticed a reduction in fuel burn over?
Yes, I was going to say, I think you can go faster burning less, same speed, but burn less fuel than you would on a non-stepped hull. I think that's probably right.
I hear you're running an FMT chip nowadays. How do you like that chart, and how has it helped you with your fishing and your guiding?
Yeah, I do. I run on both boats. The main thing it does for me is when we at high tide, on the mid tide through high tide, you can't see the oyster bars here. They get covered up with water. Sometimes, midway through the tide, there's only a few inches of water above them.
Right.
Obviously, that's a really big obstacle. You don't want to hit
it's like hitting
part of your boat.
It's like hitting concrete. I don't think people realize how hard an oyster bed is.
Right. It's like concrete covered in razor blades. So
that's a good analogy,
which is awful. Yeah. So
worst of both worlds.
Yeah. So what that's done for me is on those higher tide stages, even though the places I fished them for many years, but at least gives you the confidence to go, okay, look, I am where I am. I can see, what he's done with that is pretty incredible. He's circled all the oyster bars, or at least the majority of them, and you get a really good sense of exactly where you are. So like if I'm idling up onto a flat, I have all the confidence in the world. I know exactly where I am. Even though I've been there 1,000 times, I don't care who you are. When the oyster bars are covered up here, it's hard to tell where every little, because some of them are only 3 feet in diameter, but they stick up just as tall as all the other ones, and they'll do just as much damage to your boat as a giant oyster bar would do. So it's really nice to be able to. I think that's where I've used it more than anything, and then I use it a little bit on a little bit of traveling that I've done, and I would think for somebody trying to learn a new area, it would be invaluable. I mean, it would, you could, to be able to see where you're going and be safe. It's a big safety thing is really what it is for me.
Very true. On your
And
back
for
to
most
your
people.
Pathfinder real quick, are you running a flat shack on the engine on
Yes.
that one? Okay.
Yes. That's something that is really great about that boat. I can run the jack plate all the way up. It's the Atlas jack plate, I think, and it's 6-inch jack plate. I can run the boat with the jack plate all the way up, and the boat still handles perfectly fine. A lot of boats, including a lot of skiffs, that's not the case. When you jack the jack plate up, you can go straight for a little while. Right. Yeah, the prop starts cavitate. The prop does cavitate a little, but I mean, today the wind was blowing so hard that the tide never really came in the area I was fishing, and I was in the bay boat, and I had to run through some creeks that were really shallow, and no problem. I can run the boat with the jack plate all the way up for as long as I want to. Motor doesn't overheat, the water pressure holds, and the maneuverability of the boat is still there, which I don't know of many other bay boats that you can do that in, including probably some of the other Pathfinders. I think it might be even unique. I mean, not that they won't run with the jack plate up, but just this boat in particular, it's impressive to me how maneuverable it is with it all the way up.
Yeah, I need to get behind the helm of that because I'd like to test that myself. That combination of the stepped hull with a flat jack on there that raise the engine up. That would be interesting to see. If nothing, just to see how slow I can run it and it still stay on a plane.
Yeah, it'll. I don't know the exact miles per hour, but yeah, you can put the tabs all the way down, jack plate up. You can run that boat through just about anything. It's kind of scary.
You're probably hardly burning. Relatively speaking, you're probably not burning a lot of fuel that way.
Right. No, it's it runs. It'll cavitate a little with it all the way up, but for me, it makes a big difference because there's a lot of places I fish around here that you can't get in unless you have that setup. I mean, most guys are in their skiffs looking at me going, how in the heck are you back in here on the side?
Right. What are you doing back here?
Including my buddy.
Me, right?
Yeah, my buddy has a little 18 professional, Captain Chris Herrera, one of my best buddies, and he's looked at me and shook his head many times, like, how are you back in this spot with me fishing in here? In that boat, it's that impressive. So
that's awesome. When you do a trade on yours, when you're buying a new skiff or a new Pathfinder, do you sell yours? Or are you trading them in? Or are you letting the dealership? How are you doing that? Let's say somebody wants to buy one of your skiffs or your bay boats. Right. How often are you going through that process, and are you selling them on your own? Are you letting everybody know, hey, this one's for sale, I'm going to get a new one? Or
I generally don't advertise them for sale. I think I've had, even before I got into onto the Pathfinder Maverick team, I was doing the same thing with some other manufacturers. So I think I have a reputation. I tend to have a line of people waiting
to buy it. Right?
To buy, yeah, which is great.
That's a good problem to have.
The bay boat I do sell every year at a predetermined time. I know when I'm going to sell it when I get it. So I generally have somebody waiting to buy it. I have what I like to call boat OCD. I think you have it as well.
Oh, I do. Yeah, I'm a detail freak. I mean,
So people know that about me, and know that if they get one of my used boats, it's essentially just a brand new boat.
And I take looks like it just came off the trailer. Right.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever listed one for sale. I think they just word of mouth. I've sold them that way. So
for those who'd like to take a trip and go fishing with you, if they're wanting to fly fish, what are you saying that they probably need to be able to reach? 40 feet, 50 feet for your ecosystem to be able to reach those fish? I know you can get mighty close to them with the Maverick, but how far do you like to lay off of them?
I mean, I don't know if there's a length you absolutely need to be able to get to, but I always tell people that, and we talked about earlier, distance is at a premium. I mean, the further you can get it out there, the better your chances are going to be most days. Now, there is an exception with flood tide fishing. When those fish are in the grass, I mean, you could get you can go up and poke them with your rod a lot of times, and they don't know.
Do a roll cast and put it right on top of them.
Yeah, so that's which is cool because I do get, and probably a lot of guides in Florida get fly fishermen that are typically fishing in streams and rivers and trout fishing, that freshwater trout fishing, and a lot of those guys, even though they have a ton of experience, they don't have a ton of experience with making casts or even double hauling or they're used to roll casting and making shorter casts. So I always tell people that, hey, practice a little bit, get make sure you can double haul and try to get distance. But I like the challenge of trying to get somebody a fish when they aren't making a long cast too, and we can usually get it done. But I think it's only in the years ahead. I think it's only going to be a bigger deal to be able to get that line out further because the fish are definitely, they're only going to get spookier.
Pressure as they're getting more pressure, right?
Yeah, because with all the sport, obviously, probably everywhere in Florida, not just here. Or I know it's everywhere in Florida. The sport of shallow water fishing has absolutely exploded recently, and it's a good thing. I love it. I mean, I think it's cool, but it also definitely puts more pressure on the fish. So you have to be a little more savvy with your approach, and if you want to catch them,
Well, we're just getting more people. I mean, our state, last time I heard, is pulling in 1,000 people a day. I mean, that's phenomenal population growth.
That sounds low. It seems like
no, it's not when you start adding it up. And that's probably the one that signed the rental agreement or the mortgage. We're still, their partner, their children. So yeah, that's just the one we know of when you think about it.
Yeah.
So we're getting more pressure on the system because of that, and understandable. So do you tailor any of your trips to the newer person who's wanting to take up the sport? I mean, will you work with them on their casting ahead of time, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I enjoy that. It was in my golf teaching career, that was my favorite part of that, and I think it's probably one of my favorite parts of this one as well, is teaching people or helping people to learn how to do something. I mean, I don't claim to be a great certified in any way kind of fly teacher, but I think I've helped quite a few people get into the sport and taught them the basics and stuff. In fact, I have a lady, her name's Patty Scott. Maybe she'll listen to this, I don't know, but Patty is one of the coolest ladies I've ever met, and she's a serious athlete. And I've been taking her and her family fishing since I started guiding, probably 15, 16 years, I'd imagine now. And she recently, over the last, I don't know how many years, probably 3 or 4 years, she's got into fly fishing, and she caught her, first redfish with me, and caught her first tarpon last year with me. And she, that's just an example. That's one of my favorite examples is I've worked with her, and it's so fun to watch her get better and everything. But no, I do. I enjoy. I really like if somebody calls me and says, "Hey, I want to learn how to fish this area," and I like that. But I don't like if somebody calls and says, "Hey, I'm new to the area. I just want you to go show me some spots." I don't like that. Like nobody wants to hear that. But teaching somebody, whether it be how to cast or what to look for, or how to approach something, I mean, that's cool. Or even throwing a cast net or something technical like that. I mean, I like doing all that stuff. That's a really big part of, I think, being a fishing guide in general, is teaching people that.
So it behooves the customer to sit there and say, "Captain Derringer, I'm new to the sport. I need you to work with me." In other words, don't be in your shell, and try to be the guy that goes out there and says, "Oh, well, I've been fishing since I was 6 years old. I know how to do that." I mean, you and I both, right. You and I both have dealt with those type of like, okay, well, that's why I'm out casting you by 20 yards, because you've been chunking live shrimp all your life.
Right.
So it does help you if they just say, look, I do need help. I want you to show me. Can you give them instruction even off the skiff to help them work with that? Sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm open. I've had, many times I've invited people to come over, over to the house, and we'll, like I said, learn how to throw a cast net, learn how to throw a fly rod, how to rig something up. I mean, I like you, I like talking boats, and I've talked a lot of people through buying their boat and rigging them and all that. And so that's part of it too. I've taught them, I don't know if it's teaching or just suggested, certain ways to set their boats up, and,
Sure.
All that stuff. I mean, I really do. And actually, Chris Herrera, Captain Chris, who I've mentioned earlier, he and I a few times have done, like little fishing schools, like 2-day schools. And we haven't done one in a long time. We ought to do one again sometime soon.
That's great. Like a clinic.
Like a clinic where you can, we're going to give you all the basics and then some of how to fish inshore, and from picking the right lures and reels and rods to tossing a cast net to how to approach fish on a flat, and anything and everything in between. To me, that's priceless. If you can go listen to a couple of guys that have been guiding for, Chris has been, I think he's even been a couple of years before me, almost 20 years. I think that's I really enjoy the teaching part. Like I was saying, I think that's
I bet you do.
A lot of fun.
If somebody is going to go fishing with you, and this is an interesting question when I'm having podcasts with my guide friends, which do you prefer? Does somebody bring their own tackle or just use what you have on the boat? Which do you prefer?
Well, I mean, I can't lie to you. If somebody says I'm bringing my own stuff, I usually kind of do in my head, I let out a long sigh going, oh, but really, I'm fine either way, because a lot of times, if a guy's a serious angler, he's got nice stuff and we could rig it if his stuff works. I will say this, if somebody brings stuff on my boat and I look at it and I don't think it's going to work, I'll tell them, like, hey, that's not going to work for what we're going to do. If you want to catch some fish, you need to use what I have, or we need to change up what you're using, whatever. Sure. I'm not, but I've had, actually, you mentioned fiberglass. I actually had a guy not too long, it was a couple of years ago, I guess, bring an old bamboo bait casting rod.
Wow.
And it was like, I think it was like his grandfather's or something, or his dad's, whatever it was. And he used it and he caught a couple of fish. He probably would have caught more had he used my stuff, but
I don't know if I'd want to take something like that and run it through salt water.
Right. And actually, I have a guy, a really good dude, this guy Ed, who you might listen to this, I don't know, but I take him and his wife Marcia fishing sometimes, and he brings an older bait caster. I think it's an older Abu Garcia bait caster, which is not new technology, but he's proficient with it, so that's a little different. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He can make a good cast and catch
thousands.
He catches
thousands of times, right?
Yeah, but so he always brings, and so I'm fine either way. I will say that no matter what, I always bring my own stuff as in addition to whatever somebody's bringing, just in case.
Sure. Sure. What time of the year do you feel is best to come and fish? And I know that's going to vary species. I know tarpon is very seasonal for you. Well, for me, it's seasonal to a certain degree, when we get the migration of spoons moving through. But what do you feel is best for a mixed bag to come fish? May?
Yeah, that's probably, if you're looking at just anything and everything, May is a great month. I mean, it's and just as far as action goes, you have, if the redfish and tarpon aren't, if the premier species aren't happening, you have jacks and ladyfish and bluefish and all kinds of other little things. And but yeah, springtime here is pretty great. The bait starts showing up in bigger numbers. Bait being pogies on the beach, and then finger mullet on the inshore side of things, and then but that being said, wintertime red fishing here can be phenomenal. Our water's clear. We have big schools of redfish on the flats. So if sight fishing is your thing, that, late November through usually about this time, about through March, can be great for that. And then in the summer, if you like throwing a topwater plug, topwater red fishing in the summer is great. Tarpon fishing can be really great. We get those big jacks. So yeah, and then we talked about earlier, the trout in the spring are good, the flounder in the fall, the flood tides in the fall. There's always, the cool thing about this area is there's always something. I think for me, it also keeps it some interesting, like we're not doing the exact same thing year round.
Right.
There's actually some pretty big changes that we make starting about this time of year, going away from the sight fishing part of things and going into, the tarpon season and all that. It's, it keeps you on your toes, I guess, for sure.
Would you consider the person that's wanting to do a trophy redfish hunt, would that be the winter months since you have a better visibility to be able to pick them off, or does that really matter?
Yeah, I mean, it probably, it depends on what your definition of a trophy redfish is. I mean, if some people would say a trophy redfish is a giant one, so that would be, spring and fall. We get the big giant bull reds that and I don't do a whole lot of that unless somebody kind of requests it. That's a lot of, you fish deep water at the jetties and some of the stuff on some of the nearshore wrecks and the bridges. And I do a little bit of it, but that's not necessarily my thing. But that could be considered a trophy redfish, a big one. But just for, for me, I like the sight fishing game, whether it be the flood tide or the clear water in the winter, or we also get, low tide redfish with their backs out of the water in the creeks, even in the summertime. In the summertime, actually, it's really good. They get up and they're belly crawling, chasing little shrimp in the creeks. So that's some of the most exciting stuff.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. I'm gonna have to come up here and do that with you.
Yeah, you need to.
Even in the summer, you see them doing that with the water being as hot as it is. That's we get an abundance of tiny little baits in the summertime. Little shrimps, little minnows, little mullet, and they get up there where you would not think they would be. I mean, they get up there with half their body out of the water, belly crawling along the mud looking for those things. And obviously that's a pretty cool bite when you get to see that happen. Oh yes, most definitely. What gear items should they bring, and probably more important, not forget to bring? Because I'm sure you've seen that happen more than once. Well,
I'll start with what not to bring, and that is, do not bring spray sunscreen on my boat, please.
Amen.
Please do not bring spray sunscreen. I have, and I'm a really easygoing guy on the boat. When somebody gets on my boat, I don't give them rules but I do give them one rule. If I see you have spray sunscreen in your hand, you're not allowed to use that on my boat. I refuse to let people use that. So, and I provide them with other sunscreen. So, so that's what not to bring. But I would say, you don't need to bring much. And that's kind of the beauty of going with a guide.
Sure.
Is if you don't want to bring anything, you don't have to. I would say two things you definitely need to bring would be a hat and a pair of sunglasses. Now on my boat, specifically on my boats, you don't even need to bring, I have sunglasses for everybody if they need them. But I always tell people, bring your sunglasses and bring a hat. You're going to see more fish, especially if you're sight fishing. And even if you're not, you're going to be more comfortable. But aside from that, actually, you know what? The other thing would be bring any of the cooler months, bring an extra jacket. That's probably the number one thing
that people forget.
Do wrong is they underdress, because it's always, for instance, in the winter here, the water is 60 degrees. Even if it's 75 degrees outside, when you're running the boat over 60-degree water, it's cold. It's cold, So
I've told a lot of people, even when you think it's warm, it's always going to feel 15 degrees cooler on the water. Always.
That's right. So but really, I mean, all that being said, for me, if you show up, that's all you need to do. Show up ready to fish and have a good time, and that's away we go.
Well, I think that would be a good time for people, since you carry them on the boat, to try a set of Bajíos compared to what they're currently using.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, if you're an ambassador or pro staff, whatever you want to call it these days, influencer, whatever it is, for one of those brands, I mean, what better way to get it out there? I mean, that's real world conditions. It's not somebody going to a store and walking out into the parking lot.
True.
So
true.
yeah, I always, I obviously would always let them try the ones that I have on my face, but I always carry a couple of my extra pairs in there in case somebody forgets theirs, or many times, especially recently, because I'm telling you, man, the lenses are phenomenal on the Bahios. A lot of people will try them on and go, can I wear these for the rest of the trip?
Yeah, I got to get me one of these, right? Right.
And they end up going and getting them. So, I mean, seeing is believing for sure. When you put them on, I mean, yeah. So I always try to have them, and I always do. I always have a few pairs in the boat for people to check out.
What lenses are you keeping with you? Do you have some of the more rose colored that you were talking about and some green so they can compare, or?
I do. Yeah. So I'll have the green mirror, the rose mirror, and it's a silver mirror, and I'm trying to remember what they call that one. I think they call it the permit, but yeah, those are the kind of I actually do have some of the blue mirror lenses as well, but I generally don't use those for fishing as much. I use them just as my casual pair of sunglasses.
Right.
But I'm not much of, I think that would be a great offshore lens when you're dealing with all that blue water and glare off that. But yeah, green and the pink. And then it's pretty cool. They just came out with a purple mirror. I think they call it violet maybe. And I just tried those on for the other day. I have not tried them on the boat yet, but I'm looking forward to trying those. Al, who runs the company, owns the company, he's pretty psyched about them. And if anybody's an expert on sunglasses, he is. So if he's telling me there's something to try, then you need to try them. I'm excited to check them out.
Where are they located in Florida?
They're in New Smyrna.
Oh, so they're fairly close to you.
Yeah, from where I am, they're about 45 minutes or so. And that's a big thing with them is their warranty and their turnaround time for repairs. I mean, if you're in Florida and something happens, you send them back, you're probably going to have them back in a day or two. They're real great. Quick about it. Yeah,
that's
which
great.
is really nice.
If somebody is wanting to reach you and set up a trip, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably go to the website. It's inshoreadventures.net. That's got all the information you need, and it's got my phone number there as well, or a little email form you can fill out. And then also connected to that site, there's a blog, a fishing report that I do. I've been keeping it for, probably 12 years now, maybe or so. Wow. I used to do it every single day. Now I'll blame it on my kids. I don't do it every day now. Sure. Because I don't have much time, but I try to keep up with it as much as possible. It's usually up to date. I'll do it every couple of days. So that if somebody was interested in what we're catching, instead of just me telling them, they can go on there and I put the pictures up from whatever we caught that day. They can take a look and see what we've been catching. I didn't mention it at all, but I have two guys that work for me full time now. That's how busy we are here. My brother being one of them, his name's Captain Todd Derringer. Another guy, Captain Shane Stover. So between the three of us, we can usually I typically stay booked out about 3 or 4 months. So okay. I try to tell people if they, if they, for some reason they really want to fish with me, get with me as early as they can if they know they're coming into town.
Well, good deal. Brother, I appreciate the time that you took to spend with us. It was very educational. Really enjoyed it. We need to do it again soon. More importantly, I need to jump on your Maverick and just see how she runs. I've been wanting to get up there and do that.
Come on, you got it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, man. I
need to come down and run around. Hey, I got plenty of space for you to park yours. You can bring it down. Love to have you.
Yeah. I am going to take you up on that one of these days for sure.
That'd be great. That would be awesome.
And I appreciate you having me, man. It was good talking to you.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining us. And give the girls and your bride my best. Let me know when the girls are teaching flight casting. I'd love to come up there and take a class with them. You definitely need to post some of those pictures of the girls out there casting fly rod. I'd love to see that. But
yeah, I will.
Thanks again for joining us, and have a great evening.
All right, Dave. Thank you, man. Take it easy.
Thank you, buddy. Well, we hope you enjoyed our show today and found it both educational and entertaining at the same time. If you or your company would like to join the team on Flats Nation for a podcast or other coverage, feel free to drop us a quick note at info@flatsnation.com. And now, here's the rest of the song to run the skiff back home with. Tight lines and God bless.